Hi everyone! Thanks for being here today to do some cool science with me. My name is Crystal and I'm a biochemistry professor at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, or UCCS. In case you haven't heard of biochemistry before, when we think about the word bio or biology, it usually means life, right? Things that are alive, like me, like you, like your pet dog, like the tree outside where you live. Those are all things that are alive. And chemistry has to do with molecules, the tiny, tiny things inside of our body made out of atoms that are bonded together. So really we're interested in the molecules that make up life. That's what a biochemist does. So today we're going to do some experiments learning about molecules called enzymes. Enzyme is kind of a fun word to say, enzyme. So an enzyme is a tiny machine in your body that's used to build things, put them together, or it's used to break things apart. So if you've ever thought about when you eat some food, how does your food get broken down? You probably think of your digestive system. You know, it gets broken down in your stomach and in your intestines. But if we think even smaller, how is this happening on a tiny, 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 tiny level? What is breaking down those molecules into tiny parts? And then how does your body take those parts from your food and build them into something that looks like you? You guys are all growing right now. You're getting bigger and stronger. You're building bones and muscle and you're growing taller. How does your body break down your food and turn it into you to help you grow? The answer is enzymes. So we're going to learn about an enzyme in our saliva that breaks down starch. So what is starch? When you think of starchy foods, what do you think of? Maybe you think of some things like pasta or potatoes, or let's see, what else, like rice. Those are all starchy foods. They're usually kind of whitish in color. So we have starch in our foods, and that starch starts getting broken down as soon as we start eating it, as soon as it touches our saliva. So we're going to do a test to start. We're going to test to see what foods have starch in them. We're just going to test a couple. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to use another chemical called iodine. So what's cool about iodine is iodine turns purple when it comes in contact with starch. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So here I have an empty glass beaker. See, it's all empty. And here I have a bottle of starch. So this is just starch. Maybe you can use some cornstarch at home. That will work just fine. And then a little spatula to help me weigh some out. Or not weigh it, but just move it into this beaker. So I'm just going to take a little bit of my starch and I'm going to put it into my beaker. Cool. Got my white starch, white powder in my beaker. I'm going to add a little bit of water. So here I have just some water in this beaker. And we're going to mix it up. And like I said, starchy foods are usually kind of white in color. And this powdered starch that we're mixing up, same kind of thing. It's kind of a white color. You can see it against the black table. And now I'm going to add some iodine. So this is antiseptic iodine. This is something you can buy at the drugstore, but you have to be careful to make sure you buy the right one. It should be kind of a brownish color, like what you see here in this bottle. So if you buy this antiseptic iodine that's a brownish color, you can do these same experiments at home. You just have to make sure you get the same type of iodine. So we have our iodine solution, and it's kind of brown right now, but remember I said that when iodine comes into contact with starch, it's going to turn a purple color. So let's find out. Flip the cap open. And here we go. I'll add a couple drops of iodine. So you see what it looks like? It's kind of orange, and then boom, turns this black purplish color really fast. See what that looks like? Kind of purpley, right? Almost like a grape popsicle. So what that means is that if we have starch in our food, then the iodine is going to turn kind of this purpley color. And if there's no starch, it's not going to change color at all. So let's test out a couple of foods. Let's start with some bread. Here's just some bread. I broke a piece off and I put it inside this tube. See, just bread in a tube. I'll add a little bit of water just to kind of help stuff mix around. Now it's soggy bread. All right, ready? Now we're gonna add our iodine. Let's find out if bread has starch in it, which we expect it probably should, right? I said that was, well, maybe I didn't say that was one of the examples. Let's find out. So watch as it adds. It's like that immediate black color. I'm gonna put the cap on. I'm gonna mix it up a little bit so we get that water in there. Shake it, shake it. See, the whole thing turned purple. So we know that bread has a ton of starch in it, lots of starch inside of bread. Let's test something else. I have some canola oil here. So maybe the kind of oil you use to cook with at home. And I poured some into this vial. So do we think oil has starch in it? Is it white color? It's kind of yellowish, maybe. Let's find out. Add my iodine. It's actually just sinking to the bottom, kind of like a salad dressing, huh? I'll shake it up. What do you think? It's not really turning purple. It's kind of staying that same brown color, right? It does look kind of cool though. It kind of looks like a lava lamp. So what do we think about oil? Starch? I think it doesn't have any starch because to me that's a pretty brown color. It looks pretty much the same as the color we started with, especially if we compare it to our bread, right? Our bread is a much more purplish kind of color than our oil is. Let's test something else. How about, let's do some rice. So I've got this bag of rice I brought from home. And again, I poured a little bit in a tube here. I'll add some water just to help things mix up. And now we're gonna add our iodine. Ooh, that was a little bit of a lot. Okay, so it's a brown color at first. And it turned that dark black purplish color. And you can see even the rice, just the rice stuck at the top there, it's kind of purpley now. So rice, we now know rice has starch in it too. Oh, let's see here. I've got some ketchup. Might be hard to see because it's already pretty dark, but let's try. I'll squirt a little ketchup into this container. How many of you at home like ketchup? Do you eat it with French fries? Do you eat it with burgers or chicken nuggets? Maybe you eat it with apples. Just kidding. All right, here's our ketchup in a dish, right? Adding the iodine. Kind of sits on top. I'll mix it up now. And it still pretty much looks like ketchup. Maybe like barbecue sauce. To me, it looks a little more brown, but it doesn't really look purple, right? Compared to our rice. So probably no starch in ketchup. All right, I've got one more food to test. Candy corn. Oh, it smells so good too. So let's find out if one of our favorite Halloween treats has starch in it. So I've got our candy corns here in a tube. We'll add a little bit of water. Add our iodine. And let's shake it up. What do we think so far? Shake it harder. I would say, to me, this looks kind of dark purple. Looks pretty similar to the rice. So yeah, candy corn has starch in it. It's got a lot of sugar too, and iodine doesn't bind sugar, but candied corn does have starch. That's, as far as I understand, that's what holds it all together in a big, soft, gooey candy. Okay, so now what we've seen is that we can use iodine to find out if there's starch in the thing that we're testing. So now what we're going to do is we're going to demonstrate that the enzyme in your saliva, that amylase, is able to break down starch. So I have in this tube a mixture of starch and iodine. I already mixed it together, and you can see it's this purplish color. So I have this in this tube, and this is just an empty sauce cup. Nothing in there. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to spit into the tube. And you kind of need a lot. You got to have enough to cover the bottom of your cup. If you're doing it from home, maybe try to spit 4 or 5 times in there. My mouth is kind of dry from talking. And you can't drink water to help, because water is not spit. Water doesn't have any enzymes in it. It's got to come from you. All right, I think I got enough. It's pretty foamy, but I got some, see? Okay, now I'm gonna add my starch that's mixed up with iodine, just in this little tube. A little more, just in case. Put the lid on so I don't spill spit everywhere. All right, and we see it starts out a purplish color. I'll swirl it around. And what do you think? So it still has starch in there, but what do you notice to that purple color as we wait for it? It seems like it's getting lighter. It started out pretty dark purple, and now it's starting to get lighter. Here, I brought an extra tube of starch to compare. See, this is what we started with, pretty dark, and already this is what we have. So imagine inside of that, this is your long molecule of starch. I just have a piece of yarn here. This is your long molecule of starch. And this is your enzyme. Your enzyme that's coming in and just cutting up your starch into little tiny pieces, breaking down your food so your body can use it to make you grow bigger. And that's what the little enzyme in there is doing. And he's in your saliva all the time, just working all the time. I'll show you what this looks like now. So it's still getting a little lighter. And if you're trying this at home after the recording, it might take a little bit of time, especially if you've had some water recently. And some people have more enzymes than others. So you might need to give it maybe 10 minutes and just let it sit. So that's what we'll do. Let's give it 10 minutes. I'm putting it right there, and I'm not going to touch it. And in the meantime, I want to show you some cool biochemistry stuff. So I'm going to show you the screen on my computer. So what you see right here, this is what that enzyme in your saliva looks like. Now I'll say it's not really rainbow colored. We added the rainbow coloring to give it more contrast so we could see it better. But biochemists, scientists like me, used experiments to be able to find out what this enzyme looks like. So we can look at it from a couple different views, rotate it around. And you notice it's made out of a lot of these kind of ribbony shapes, right? Kind of like curly cues and little lines connecting them. And then this part here in the center, this is where the enzyme grabs onto the starch and breaks it down into little pieces. See, it kind of looks like teeth here, right? That's where it grabs onto the starch, and it cuts it up, and then it lets go. And it grabs a new piece of starch and it cuts it up and chews it up, and then it lets go. So this is what your amylase enzyme looks like in your saliva. This, in a tiny, tiny, tiny form, is present in thousands of copies in your saliva. Let's look at some other cool stuff that we can learn from doing biochemistry. So one of the things we can do is we can take cool images of things in life. So we use a microscope, and these are some images of bacteria. Maybe you've heard of bacteria, like if it gets in your food, it can make you sick, like food poisoning. And one of the things that some bacteria have they have these little things behind them called flagella, and that's how the bacteria move. You see, they don't have arms and legs like we do, but instead they have these flagella that work like propellers, and they spin around and they move the bacteria forward. Some of the other things we can see pictures of as biochemists, we can see pictures of human cells. So that's what these are in this image. These are human cells. So in the center here, that's your DNA, right? Maybe some of you have heard of DNA. It's the stuff that makes you who you are. It's a mix of the DNA from your parents that mixed together in a special way to make up you. And that's what makes your hair the color it is. That's what makes your eyes the color they are. That's what makes you tall or short. That's the DNA, and it's inside of every single one of your cells. And then the green stuff here, that's called the cytoskeleton, where cyto means cell, and you know what skeleton means. So if you think about your own body, you have a skeleton made out of bones, and that's what gives you structure. That's what helps you stand up and move around. Cells have a skeleton too, but their skeleton is usually found around the outside of the cell, and it's called the cytoskeleton. I bet all of you know what this is. This is coronavirus. And coronavirus has these little proteins on the outside of it that make it all spiky. And in fact, they call it the spike protein. So the difference between an enzyme and a protein is an enzyme is used to build things or break things down. But an enzyme is also a type of protein. So the spike protein doesn't build things and it doesn't break things down, but what it does is it helps make the virus stick to your cells. So that's what's being shown in this picture here is here's a virus, a coronavirus, and it's got all these spiky proteins on it, and the spike proteins make it stick to your cell, and that's how it gets inside your cell and causes an infection. So here's an image of just that spiky protein. So you'll notice it looks pretty similar to the amylase in your saliva, right? We notice it's got a lot of these curly cues in here, these kinds of ribbons. It's got strings connecting the different parts of it, but this one's a lot bigger. And so as biochemists, we can learn about these things to try to understand how they work, so we can find out how does the spike protein help coronavirus stick to your cells. And then we can try to find out if there's a way we can stop it. So if we know what it looks like, we can try to design a medicine that will bind to the spike protein, and maybe it just covers it all up. It just coats the outside so that it can't help it stick to the outside of cells. If you've probably have heard of vaccines and getting your shots, right? And scientists are working really hard to try to develop a vaccine for coronavirus. And what they're using, some of them anyways, some of the ways they're trying, is they're taking just this spiky protein. They don't use the whole virus, just the spiky protein, and they give it to your body, and your body recognizes it as something foreign, something that's an invader. And so they give this spiky protein to your body attacks it, and then what happens is the next time it sees this spiky protein on the virus, it attacks it right away, and the virus doesn't have a chance to make more copies of virus and make you sick. That's one of the things that biochemists do with the work and the science and the experiments that we do. We use tools in the lab, we use computers to help us understand and see the things that are too tiny to see with our eyes. So that's why we use microscopes and other techniques. I'm going to stop sharing my computer screen now, and let's see how our saliva is doing. What do you think? It's almost clear compared to what we started with. Pretty neat. I think my body is so cool. So here we had our starch, and I spit into it, and the amylase enzyme in my saliva broke down the starch, and you can tell because now there's no starch in it. It's a clear color. So I hope you guys have had fun with me today. I've certainly had fun doing these experiments. And again, if you want to do this at home, the most important thing is that you get this antiseptic iodine and make sure it's a brown color when you buy it to start. And other than that, I just use foods that you can find in your kitchen and your own spit you can find in your mouth. Have a wonderful science week. I hope you guys learn lots and have lots of fun.